And we're live. It's Imcast and I here with Contra Gentiles. Grant, Jeremy, how you guys doing?
Fantastically.
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Good enough.
Fantastic. Well, we got no topic, so what have you guys been up to?
Just hanging out,
Yeah, working.
Yeah.
drinking seltzer water.
Seltzer water. I guess I enjoyed y'all's episode on the whale. Maybe we actually want to go see it.
Oh, you
yeah.
already watched that? Yeah.
Yeah, it looks
Oh, is that
pretty.
one up? I'm behind. I need to catch up on that one.
Yeah. I think that one definitely is worth a watch. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's. Have you watched much of Aronofsky's films in the past?
I've seen Noah, and that was it.
Oh, you just seen Noah? Okay.
Yeah, anything other than that, I wasn't bored. Wasn't the right word. I was just confused, and I'm like, I don't want to. I don't want to. I'm not paying money to see a movie and be confused. I want to just sit back and relax.
Yeah. So maybe you're not gonna like this one too much. No,
So good. He's just like, wow, he's growth.
say
Why am I
don't we
watching a
see
growth guy for 2
an
hours?
hour and 45 minutes?
he's gay?
Yeah,
It kind of begins with it in your face.
A
that he's
fat gay
fucking
guy.
fat, yeah.
all my
Wait,
atheist friends love it, and I just don't want to see it now. Like they say, it's a commentary on consumerism and American fatness, and I'm like, I don't want to see it now.
Wrong.
I don't
It
care.
is.
Correct.
Yeah.
Midwit take.
Mhm.
You kind of have to as long as you're aware that the gay thing and it's in your face in the very beginning, and then you'll be fine, because that threw me off at first.
It really gets less obnoxious after the first 2 or 3 minutes.
Yes, it does. Yeah. But at first I was like, oh, did they really have to do this? Is this like part filling the quota? But when you actually see the theme of the movie, and then you know it actually plays an intricate role in it, so it becomes an essential part. But yeah.
Do you have to start that way though? Like I feel like you're like first impression just is going to turn off so many people at that point.
He had to be
Yes.
as disgusting as possible right at the beginning. So
Fair.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's why it does so well, because it's supposed to be bad.
mhm.
Like it's not really intentionally to be good, but it is going to be shown.
Is,
Not even graphically, but still.
Speaking
Well,
of
on his monitor, it
movies,
was pretty graphic.
No, it wasn't. There was no dick.
Okay, there was no dick. That's true, because then it would have to be rated X. Yes.
speaking of movies, I've been recently watching like late '90s, early 2000 comedies because they're just so much
Nice.
funny. Like, you ever see Office Space from Mike Judge?
Oh yeah.
I watched
that's a
I
great
watched
one.
it yesterday for the first time. Absolutely, I loved it.
I haven't seen
Yeah,
that for a
incredible.
long time.
It was. I loved it. Every scene, I'm like, I like this guy. He does not care anymore about his job. It was cathartic.
Yes,
I
yeah.
always do that.
Have you seen the show that that actor made recently, Loudermilk? It was like 2017, I think, when it came out. That's a-
Louder milk.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty damn good show. You know, he's like an alcoholic and everything, and he runs like a recovery thing. But it only has 3 seasons. I don't know if they're ever going to make a 4th one, but I definitely recommend that show. It's
He's
pretty
aged,
engrossing.
he's aged quite a bit. Just looking at the trailer now, that guy's
It's
aged.
been what, 20
Oh, he
years?
did,
I
yes.
know. I just, he was so young in that one. He's like, oh, he's aged.
Yeah.
When did Office Space come out? Was that early 2000s or
I think
late
it was
90s?
exactly 2000s. Is what
Was it
I-
exactly 2000? Okay, yeah.
It's I watched that. I'm like, I was alive, and so at that time period, so I vaguely recognized certain sayings, but most of them just like, this is not. I don't know any of this.
Yeah.
Like, it is a whole vibe. I'm just like, this is not my country. This is not my culture. It was a good movie. It is yeah. I'm hoping you guys do go forward and do more of the movie episodes you were talking about, because there's some really
It's
that
planned
was
for
like,
next week. Yeah.
what movie you guys thinking of doing? Fences.
Fences.
Yeah.
Nice,
Try Fences
nice.
next.
It's like every once in a while you get a movie that's just obviously come out now as a shit. You get every once you get a movie that's like, okay, this movie is shit if you watch it at the most basic midwit level, but if you
Mhm.
actually watch it, it's pretty good. You know,
Yeah.
like that's my take for BoJack Horseman. That if a midwit watches BoJack Horseman, it's garbage. But if you actually watch it and pay attention to it, it's not so bad. It actually has
Yeah.
lessons about pretty good and worth seeing.
I can't stand BoJack Horseman.
I
It
can't
makes me
either.
way too sad.
It
It's
is
just
pretty
it
good.
I've heard of
wallows in itself. At least I think I stopped after like season 1 or season 2, and it was just
Hmm.
it was so obsessed with being depressing
Yeah.
Like I just like my desire to live was just too high to put up with anymore.
Yeah, that is the only problem, is that it feels 2 seasons too long. The final season's perfect, and they should have just put that 2 seasons earlier, and it would have been fine. But it is kind of
That's
keeps
that many
going.
seasons?
I think it's like 6 or 7 seasons.
Oh my god! I thought I had like 4.
No, it's like 6 or 7. It's a lot. It's
I actually feel as if most shows would be better off if it didn't go past season 3.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
There's something about more of like a mini series, a short term thing that I think does a show better. It's very rare when a show can actually be interesting for 8 years.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Without doing a major change, like if the show
Exactly,
like Star Trek example. Star Trek DS9 for the first 3 seasons is super boring, but then they do a whole war arc that actually gets really good later on, and they do a lot of really cool ethical questions later about war, and it's pretty good.
But I think you have to have a setup like that where the show isn't necessarily about a narrative arc. Like DS9 wasn't necessarily about a certain narrative, so you could have different things happen. It was about the place. I think most shows are pitched as, okay, here's the story I want to tell, and you very rarely do you have a story that's going to take 8 seasons to tell. So either you get to pat it all to hell, or you tell the story in 3 seasons and then you sort of wallow.
Yeah.
That was Supernatural. The guy planned for 5 seasons and they gave him 15. And it's just I recently watched, like, I stopped watching after season 5. I recently watched like the ending of it. I'm like, what the fuck happened to this show? They're fighting God now. Like there's just a little demon they're trying to fight. Now they're fighting God and God's sister. And I'm like, what the fuck happened to this?
Yeah. That's how I feel many shows kind of end up being. But I don't know.
So the only topic I really had planned for tonight was Protestants' lack of Mariology and what it kind of does to them, and like what the effects of it, pretty much, you know. So I know Grant posted about it recently, about if you don't have a holy figure who is all female, you kind of lack a what's the word you use? What's the word?
I have to remember. I remember tweeting that and then never thinking about it again. But I think it was, if your system of religion lacks an archetypal feminine, you a lot of the time are not equipped to understand, like, women can't understand their feminine experience nearly as well. And same for men, don't know how to engage the feminine experience either. And that was I don't remember how I worded it. That was essentially the idea.
I think that's spot on though. I was thinking about, I noticed that when I talk to any of my all my friends are like atheist or liberal, I talk to the women ones. They always rant about Christianity, as it's their parents. When they rant about Christianity, it's always about their parents tell them not to dress like a slut. That's pretty much all it is. Yeah. And it's just like, oh, you're just there to tempt men. You're just a tempter. That's all they are. You know, you're.
Well, because if Eve is your archetypal feminine character, then obviously that's all women could do.
Yeah. It really points to the importance of how, like, typology for Mary and Eve, Mary being the new Eve, is such a like crucial important thing this impacts everything, you know. And it's why I actually find it easier to talk. I can never convert a Protestant woman, but I find it a lot easier to talk to like the atheists who were Protestants who are women, because I kind of say, well, here's how they were all wrong, and here's how it's right over here. You know, I kind of show them that, and but it's still, most of them are just angry, you know. Just angry women who are just gross, and we're like, this one girl has like black eyelashes, like black makeup, like orange hair, and like rib cage earrings. And I'm just like, I want to.
Who are you talking to that had rib cage earrings?
This art chick I know, Cyan.
You know an Arto?
I know a lot of girls.
Do you know the one Central Floridian Arto?
Dude, there's more than one. There's quite a few.
You know all 6 Central Floridian Artos?
Yes, I know all 6 of them. They're all disgusting.
They're in a coven together. They hang out on weekends. They sew and do witchcraft. No, I think Graham makes a really interesting point, though, because the archetypical female in Protestantism is Eve and not Mary. And I think it ties into, I find Protestantism very Gnostic in a lot of ways. Like, man is sort of essentially fallen for Protestants, and that, I think, it lines up very much. If the ideal woman is the fallen woman, you have man as a fallen species, not only as like not perfected, but that's the best man can be, in a sense. In a lot of Protestantism, there is no perfected there's nothing to strive for in terms of your perfection because you are inherently fallen. Your nature is corrupted in a essential way with Protestants that I don't think it is for Catholics.
Yeah, the feminine was never redeemed.
Nothing that wasn't redeemed, but there was nothing to redeem. Like if you start with Eve, you've got something that is inherently bad.
Yes, and there was never an archetypal feminine that perfected it.
Yeah. What was I gonna say?
You lost it.
I did. I lost it. So I'm just so drained after dealing with all the Protestants
never
today.
look away.
I'm always looking away. No, I'm just so drained today after dealing with
I'm
all
having
the
this crazy idea of like it's like Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, but for podcasting, where Grant just like gives like podcasting tips. Be like, okay, here's how to do it correctly.
Listen,
I just goes through like old like Austro Thomism videos and like points out like here's how you should have set your background set up. Here's the lighting.
Do a terrible like MTV-esque webcam shot of me on my laptop going through these videos and commenting to myself in a cafe.
I pitched it before that you and Haz have a much better Queer Eye for the Straight Guy than any of the 5 gay guys over on the Queer Eye show.
Oh yeah,
and Haz isn't even gay. I
think he's spiritually gay, but he's not actually gay.
He curls his eyelashes.
That's just British.
He's a Morrissey fan. Morrissey's music is for women and gay guys.
Morrissey.
He's like Paul Joseph Watson gay. I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
So something I was thinking about related to this, because something else I noticed with Protestant men in general is they tend to be incredibly sort of limp-wristed and effeminate, and I think it's because like they have this sort of rejection of the masculine, right? They can't be dangerous, they can't be offensive, they have to be as meek as possible. And I think it's from the same. I think there's no feminine to sort of counterbalance. So they can't be masculine because they don't have a feminine to complement in the same way.
Yeah, because they're obviously two halves of a whole, and if you don't have one half, there's no point to the other half.
And everything is sort of
a complementary thing is meaningless. Something that's like by nature complementary is meaningless if it has nothing to complement. I'm watching Jeremy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I had to email somebody from work, so
it's like, wow, Jeremy is really bored.
People staff. I gotta get this, sent over right now.
All good.
Anyway, I was listening though about the archetypal women and that you need that both the masculine and the feminine are basically affected by not having the proper archetype for femininity. And I do think that's and just from my experience in Protestantism, because I know Caleb and Granty and anarcho-Catholic. Were you raised Catholic or were you?
I was a Catholic, yeah.
You grew up Catholic, okay. Yeah, so for me, it was never something that was that profound. It was always a given, especially coming from Latin American families. I mean, a lot of people in Latin America has devotions to Mary constantly, and so it was just a normal thing. So it was more of a weird thing that they didn't have any kind of adoration or they didn't have any kind of respect for Mary at all. And I think what that normally ends up doing, it's almost as if it forces one also to feminize Christ. And I think that's what I've noticed especially with a lot more of the liberal Protestants, is that they begin to put more feminine qualities on Christ because they don't really have any, they don't have anybody else to do it too. Right. And so then he becomes almost like a motherly figure. It
is weird to me when Protestant women talk about how they're trying to be Christ-like.
Right. Yeah.
I understand that on a really general level.
Yeah.
But if my mom or someone talks about how they're trying to live their life in a Christ-like way, it's like, well, he's a man. So that might be not entirely possible for you, a woman.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the only way that they can do that is when they begin to, I guess, present Christ quite differently. Mm-hmm. And I do think that's where a lot of the more hippie Jesus comes about. I think it came about from the Protestant world precisely because they needed to feminize Christ. There was no one else really to put it towards. They have no Mary. They also have no female saints. They have nothing really that is feminine. Nothing that is actually like the nurturing figure that is, more forgiving and all that stuff. And not to say that Christ is not forgiving, but just that the way that he becomes depicted is more of a softie rather than a more hard and masculine figure that is there bearing the suffering of others. And I think normally the depiction of Christ that you see in a Protestant world is that way. I remember like there's this Protestant cafe in the valley called Hebrews.
Really?
Yes, yeah. And so when you go into this cafe, they have all these images like Protestant Jesus and everything. And we always have to comment on the Protestant Jesus because there's a very unique way in which he is depicted. He has that European look, but he also has a very pussified look. And it's like
Junior said the pussy.
So Jared, really quick, Jeremy got us another interface and audio interface, and the guy he bought it from apparently recorded a few sound clips on it, and I hit one of the buttons and it was like pussy. It's like what?
But yeah, the Protestant Jesus normally in every single depiction you see is more of a pussified look rather than a hardened man who just went through torture. And when you see normally Catholic statues, especially in the older times, it was always a torturous Christ. There was one that had a lot of scars on his body, like the depictions, or like the dead Jesus being held by Mother Mary. Like he always was depicted in a very different way. But the Protestant Jesus is always like this happy, hippie-ish, Yes, yeah, just like standing there, and he has soft skin. He like
holding a lamb.
Yes, yeah, holding a lamb.
Which can be fine.
Yes,
it's the Buddy Christ from Dogma. If you've seen it, have you guys seen Dogma?
Oh yes, I haven't seen that in a long time, but yes, like that. Yeah, definitely.
And there's some weird. I mean, I thought I went a crucifix, and my grandpa saw it. He immediately went, "Jesus ain't on that cross." And that's immediately just yelled at me about it. Was Jesus on that cross? And he's a very old Southern Baptist, and so I kind of just let him have his things. I'm not going to argue with him, but at the same time, it's kind of like this is awesome.
But it's tied in. The reason you have the in Protestant churches you don't have crucifixes, you have crosses, is because they don't want to have that real depiction of Christ. When
I was looking for a crucifix to wear, I wanted to find a bloody one if I could.
Just gonna be painting it like just like your miniature collection. You just got little like red dots on it.
My Warhammer kit.
I was also looking for a complete nude one. There was this one crucifix I saw in it was reconstructed from an old underground chapel where during early parts of Christianity. I can't remember what year it was exactly, but it was like in the hundreds when they were still being persecuted. And the crucifix there, Jesus was completely naked. Like there was nothing covering the genitals and everything, because I think technically he was just nude up there, right? And and I think the later on they start to cover up the penis and all that stuff. But I always wondered if I could find a crucifix that way. It's like no, it's a little more accurate. Bloody, naked, just be awesome.
Amazing.
So Grant, how was RCIA going?
Good. We have the right of election tomorrow. We have to I have to write my name in the book of the elect in front of everybody. I think the Archbishop is at the one at 2 at Guadalupe. It's like a whole thing.
He should be there.
Yeah. It's some new step is introduced every time I think I'm on the end of the runway.
Yeah.
Do you guys, when you do your, I guess it's the rite of sending afterwards, where do you go for that? Where's the big?
What's a rite of sending? Is that another thing?
Yeah, I think it's it's later on in Lent.
Okay.
But I think you're supposed to go to like go to wherever the head of the diocese is, and
Guadalupe. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you'll get sent down there.
Guadalupe.
There's Mexicans in Alaska?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Good for them. I like Mexicans. My favorite
You're fine.
Hispanics.
Favorite Hispanics? Okay.
Oh yeah, I love Mexicans.
Do you know anyone that isn't Mexican?
I know a few people.
I can't think of anybody.
I know a few Mexicans down here. They're
Okay.
great.
Jeremy's writing another word came in.
They love Trump, but
Sorry,
they hated that
shit.
wall. That's what I love about them. They were all Mexicans around here. Like, I love Trump, but I could jump that wall, dog. So that was a comment. Like, I could jump that wall. Trump don't know us. We can jump. That was always the kind of comment about. Like, I love Trump, but I could jump that wall.
Hell yeah.
It's great
Their
people.
tiny legs.
Yeah. They're fun. Yeah.
But I think of what Jeremy was mentioning about how all the sort of hippie Christ came out of a lot of this, because it's you can't really in any kind of genuine way put the feminine into Christ. I mean, he's still a guy, so he just ends up being emasculated in a lot of ways. Like because they don't understand that complementarity, they don't know what the feminine actually looks like. All they really know how to do is to be less masculine, and they end up being effeminate instead of feminine, and they don't really understand the distinction.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And so you end up with, like, if you go to Protestant, this is why you see all the teetotaling and you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't gamble, like all these do nots, because that's how they know to be more Christ-like, is to be less masculine, is to not do manly things.
Right. Yeah.
I once knew a Protestant guy.
Self-destruct all the time.
I knew a Protestant guy who I made a joke with we're doing like some astrology something.
Astrology something.
It's good with asking astrology questions, and this guy went, astrology is a sin. And I kind of just went, but sins are fun. It's like a joke, and he got so mad. It's like, sins are never fun. I just was going like, then why do people fucking do them?
Sins are fun.
It was so he was so retarded.
Who was this? Just some old guy?
Oh no, a guy my age.
Oh.
A Protestant guy my age. I nicknamed him Hall Monitor. I never actually learned his name. I just called him Hall Monitor wherever I went.
I feel like the old Protestants are pretty mellow. It's the young ones that still have that sort of.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Oh, much as I hate Protestants, you talk to a Protestant over like 80, they're pretty great.
Over like 80.
Anyone over 80
dead yet?
Yes. Like my grandpa, for example. My grandpa, like super Protestant, Bible thumper, that kind of stuff. He consciously talk about all the time. He was getting sick, so I gave him some weed because apparently he used to grow and sell weed in the 60s. And I gave it to him. He goes, Caleb, that stuff is too strong. Give me an out-of-body experience. It's like angel dust. I don't like doing that anymore. I'm like, well, you can't just reference angel dust and then move on. The older ones are much more loose-lipped, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, I think why the older ones tend to be a little more palpable is because I think the deterioration happens slowly. It happens through 500 years. I think if it was like 500 years
I thought
ago,
you meant old people deteriorate slowly.
No. I think
it takes a while for they're dead.
Yes, yeah. Like the theological corruption, I think just happens slowly over time because I think there were more similarities if you read John Calvin with Catholicism, even though there's a lot of disparities compared to a modern Protestant, many modern Protestant writings. And I think that's just because, once you reject the hierarchy and you reject the magisterium and you reject everything, the deterioration begins to happen, not immediately, but just over time. And then when more things become accepted and more things start becoming just completely strange, it becomes something that is so far removed from the original that you get where you are now with many of the contemporary Protestant sects. Because I think some of them probably a little more conservative. Some of them try to hold back. Because like you look like William Lane Craig, he reads Aquinas and everything. He rejects a lot of the teachings in it, but he still kind of reads it. So you're gonna find a few that way. But I think overall, like even from 80 years ago, I think the Protestant world has gone through more deterioration the more time you give it, because there really is nothing guiding it. And I think when nothing is guiding it, it's like it's hard to maintain I guess proper theology or even just proper philosophical thinking throughout the entire faith.
And all it really has
Protestants,
to anchor itself is either the culture, is the zeitgeist. So it can either go towards it and it can become more like that, or it can try and rebel against it. But it doesn't have a any kind of positive direction. It can just sort of note, okay, we didn't do this. This must be bad, but without any
Right,
real
yeah.
with no real understanding of why or what a better course would be.
Yeah.
like Protestants went from Billy Graham to effeminate. What's his name? Not Jordan Peterson. Justin Bieber's pastor.
Oh,
Like they were from Billy Graham to Justin Bieber's pastor.
I'm still shocked that people were shocked. It's like the first time I saw him, I was like, of
Seems
course he's
obvious.
fucking them.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, it would be weird if he wasn't. Either that or he's fucking Justin Bieber. You know, either way, he's fucking something. You don't look like that and dress that way. You know, unless that's what you're doing. So, yeah.
I think another so in terms of old Protestants sort of being slightly more sane,
Yeah.
I'm convinced the big sort of rebellion of the Protestant Reformation was rebellion against reality. As the Orthodox sort of they didn't like authority, they had sort of had their views about that. The Protestants really sort of gave up on reason. And the older you get, the harder it is to do that. Like if you're 80, you can't really not think the world exists. You really can't not think that reason works, or you go mad or get Alzheimer's or something. But for the most part, the older you get, the more you kind of have to go back towards Catholicism because you have so much more experience of the real world. Whereas if you're young and 20 and don't know anything and spend all your time online, you can kind of pretend the real world isn't there, and then it's very easy to be a Protestant.
Yeah. But are you still in touch? I'm curious now, because are you still in touch with anybody like the Protestants you knew when you were going to like Protestant churches? Like, do you stay in touch with any people?
I haven't regularly gone in like 5-6 years.
Okay,
It's been a long time.
Okay, that's one thing. I became Catholic like 2 years ago, but I still like at least once a month bump into an old Protestant friend or see one at an event.
I mean, I'll see people around town from my mom's church and stuff, and I'm still very friendly. But
yeah.
So, Caleb, do they know that you converted, or they just think that you're not going to their service?
Most of them, I think, know at this point because I'm very, the crucifix. Anytime I get a chance to talk about it, comes up, and if I hear something stupid, I don't just kind of roll my eyes. I do just say, "Well, that's dumb because of this." It's not why I've stopped being invited to a lot of places. Sadly, the Venezuelan sects I was into don't talk to me anymore because of this. This is the worst saying.
Oh, wow.
Venezuelans.
No, really? Yeah, and dude, I knew some Venezuelans down here who did Zumba. I did Zumba with them. They was so fucking hot.
And they were Protestant Venezuelans.
Yes, well, I would never forgive their dad because he's an Anglo white engineering guy from Florida who got out of Venezuela, converted him, and then it's just like, how dare you?
I was going to say 80% of Venezuela is Catholic.
And they're vehemently anti-Catholic now. Even the mom was raised Catholic.
Communist-y Catholics, but
yeah.
Cubans are all Catholic, but they're also all communists. Kind of. It's like when a Sikh becomes evangelical, they become extremely anti-Catholic. I don't think I've met any Central Americans.
Yeah, like when they become Protestants, like holy shit, man, they're worse than the Americans in terms of how anti-Catholic they become. It's pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
So how does that? I remember some Protestant church. That was at my school, I think, years ago. But they were doing like mission trips, and they were going to predominantly Catholic areas to convert them. Like, this is the dumbest mission objective. Is that what happens? Like, are groups going down to like very Catholic parts of Latin America and saying, you should, accept Luther as your savior or whatever it is they do?
Central America is mostly.
Here's your new god. His name is Luther.
I think it's Mexico. Mexico is wildly Catholic. Colombia is wildly Catholic. Venezuela is wildly Catholic. Anything in between is like half Protestants.
And it's because of like missionary work in the last 50 years.
I think so. Yeah,
that's insane to me.
Like the Mormon thing is getting really popular in that area too.
Yeah, Mormons have been really successful in
Jehovah's Witness,
in Mexico and in Central America.
My TikTok
Mormons like. I can't. That image doesn't work in my head.
They just don't swallow the cum. No, I'm sorry. No, that's when it's bad.
I don't know what's happened with Mormons, but like lately they're blowing up. Like my TikTok feed is flooded with Mormon apologetics.
Being in Alaska, they're all over here, so I don't really notice a difference.
Yeah, my TikTok. I saw this one guy was going around and asking the people on the college campus questions about like Mormon theology. And like,
They
like
don't
this,
know
like,
at all.
they don't know. And my favorite
No.
one was what asked this chick like, would you rather have $10 million or a night with Joseph Smith? And every girl said Joseph Smith. They all wanted to fuck Joseph Smith. I'm like, this is the weirdest cult I've seen. It's just such a weird.
I mean, when you remove the polygamous aspect, I don't understand what the appeal is for Mormonism.
It's the American religion. It's the only American.
Yes.
It's the only American.
Yeah,
founded
because
religion.
it's like, what do you? I don't know what they pitch to them to convince them. Otherwise, it's like, you have to offer something. I mean, there's nothing else interesting about it. I mean, I guess you have the Elohim God and stuff.
It's got a lot of weird rules. Like I have Mormon cousins.
Yeah.
They can't drink caffeine. They can't they do a special underwear. It's
it's weird.
And I mean,
yeah.
I mean, they also believe all black people were like indecisive angels who didn't take a side, which is just. I love it. I'm so
All the white
negative.
people were God's allies, and black people couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's like what, 1972?
Yeah, I think that's when they changed it. But
the hot beverage thing is really awesome too.
Or they can't have coffee, right?
Yeah, you can't have hot beverages.
Oh, I thought it was because of the caffeine.
That's in the text. No, it's hot. The text says hot beverages.
Oh.
That is just no hot chocolate on Christmas.
That's what I mean. Like, what do they offer
Also
them to make
caffeine
it
they don't
appealing?
have.
It seems like there's nothing appealing about it. I mean, at least like the Mohammedans are kind of bad.
All the Mormons
They
I know
blow
come
themselves
from
up.
like 80 years of it. Yeah.
Wait, is that the selling point for you, Drew? That they blow themselves up? It's like, where do I kill myself? Where do I sign up? Like, you don't
There's
have to be a Mohammedan.
something there. It's like, you get to fuck a lot of women and blow yourself up. I mean, there's something badass
We're
about
back
that,
to
right?
this masculine, self-destructive. Yeah, they've embraced the masculine, clearly.
Yes. And then you got like the Mormons, or you can't drink hot beverages, and now you can't have many wives anymore.
You remember that? You remember that
well, I'm
commercial
out.
that the Mohammedans did in was it France, where it was talking about, it was like the conversion commercial they did, like talking about the beauty of their. What if they just did it about fucking women and blowing yourself up? Commercial on TV.
Well, like on my
guys shooting AKs in the air, and they're like, "Yeah, do it."
You know how like the
old army commercials.
Like things started popping up on my phone when I was having a discussion about Mohammedanism and everything with someone, and then the phone like sometimes picks up that shit, and so then start on my Instagram feed, like those videos so popping up of like female propaganda for Mohammedanism. And many of them, and everything was about having multiple women. They were like, you can't expect your husband only to be with one woman and stuff like this. And it's like all this propaganda. But that's what I mean. When you actually look at the Mohammedan propaganda, it's mainly focused on the polygamous aspect. And then they have women talk about it rather than the men talk about it, because then the women are talking about how good it is and everything. Yeah, because like my oldest brother Jonathan just recently got married to a Mohammedan lady, and like talking to her on FaceTime and everything, it's kind of like that same feel that they give. It's like this feeling of just, they're welcoming you into this community that you can partake in these ways, and then the masculine remain masculine, the men get to beat them. And then they get to do all these things. And so it's kind of like, there's a lot of things that become appealing about it, right? Not to say that I am drawn towards Mohammedanism, but yeah, I could rationally understand, okay, these are reasons why somebody would want to convert.
The aesthetics are better, the food's better.
Yes, yeah. The guys still, like, I remember when I was living in Belgium, the only guys that had muscles were Mohammedans. They were in the parks, they were doing like pull-ups, and then they were doing like complete body ups and everything. And muscle ups, I think they're called. But yeah, that's kind of like the world in which they offer to people. When I look at Mormonism, it's like I don't see what's appealing about it. They're all kind of creepy. They got the fake smile going on. The women look like they can't fuck. You can't drink hot beverages.
Men look like they don't.
Yeah, the men look like they're all kind of closeted gays. And it's like, what is appealing about this? I would never understand.
People just watch videos of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and have to join up or something.
Maybe I guess that you can potentially become a god of your own planet. I could see that being.
I can't imagine they lead with that though. Like I can't imagine like
Right.
I can see it's like, hey, lots of wives, but like, yeah, hey, you want to be a god of your own planet because people just shut the door in your face. But to the alleged theme that we're going with, like, if you want to talk about a religion that clearly understands the masculine and the feminine, Mohammedanism, they it's in a confused way, I think, still, but like, they are distinct things. Like there is masculine, there is feminine. They are different. The masculine belongs to men, the feminine belongs to women, and they have some, again, confused, but they have some reverence for the Holy Mother.
Yeah, they do actually. Yeah, that part is true. And I think they have just a better outlook than the regular atheistic leftists. And I think there's a reason why they can so easily convert many people from the atheistic world over to Mohammedanism, because there is something appealing there in the end. I mean, if your options was the gay pride leftist world, or a world in which you can, have multiple wives and blow yourself up, it's like, okay.
You want to kill yourself anyway.
This I know this was like when I've talked to a lot more atheists recently.
Why?
I have a lot of atheist friends. And the atheists are such midwit. I've never talked to an atheist who wasn't a midwit. That doesn't really exist anymore. Like they just say like remember one guy's argument, all he did was he quote Ricky Gervais, that comedian, who says things like, well, do you believe in Zeus? No. Then I just believe in one less God than you. I'm like, that's not an argument. That's stupid.
They just quote comedians now.
It's just like, why? What is wrong with you? That is not. Or does they say some nonsensical like new scientific facts thing they have and use that as an argument? Like I was on with a guy about like the Kalam argument, like back to the beginning of everything. And he goes, well, based on new scientific data, gravity works like a wave function, and so that affects time. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything I've said? It doesn't relate to anything I've made in the conversation. It's just a nonsensical sentence that makes you sound smart.
Yeah. And for some reason, they're all fans of that Negro astrophysicist.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, yeah.
That guy is diversity higher. Do y'all ever see Norm Macdonald roast him?
No, I haven't actually.
So Neil deGrasse Tyson tweeted out like, the universe does not care about you. Get over it. What's his name?
McDonald.
Sorry, yeah, McDonald has quote tweeted him on Twitter and said, "There appears to be a flaw in your logic, Neil. The universe, everything that exists is in the universe. I am in the universe. I care about people." He's so stupid.
I think something Jeremy has mentioned before that like atheists seem to have gotten dumber in the last like generation or so. Like, but I think they've sort of taken the same line as Protestants, where there's whatever foundation they had in any kind of truth or reality or good arguments has just gotten diluted. I mean, I think modern Protestants are basically just sort of closeted atheists at this point in some sense, but like they keep getting dumber and dumber, and their arguments keep having less and less to do with reality, and it's more about. I mean, like, a generation ago they have quoted Bertrand Russell, and now they're quoting, whichever random stand-up comedian, and a generation now it'll be,
TikToker.
Yeah, it'll be. Well, there's this great atheist TikTok is going to be terrifying, by the way. I'm sure that's coming.
I've seen them. They're absolutely awful. My sister sent one to me and said, "This is all my reasons why I no longer believe," and I'm like, I could spend an hour just going through each point of how stupid this guy is and debunk all of it, and she's like, "I don't want to hear it though." I'm like, "But you're wrong." Like this, they don't care. I mean,
care that they're wrong.
No, that's what bugs me more than anything nowadays. If someone were to say something like, "Yeah, I don't care an objective fact. It maybe exists. I don't care. I care about my opinions." Yeah.
I think this is why Mormonism can be popular. Is it like you don't have to offer anything of substance intellectually or theologically. It can be about how does it make you feel, or how does it mesh with whatever. I mean, you can abandon reality. You can abandon thought. And still be okay. That feels good. That sort of it gives me warm and fuzzies. I like the idea of getting to colonize the moon or whatever. Like wear my space pants or.
All these crazy religions are getting more and more popular, but Scientology does not seem to be catching up with any of them. Anyone notice that? Like Science, I saw
the buy-in's too steep.
What was it? Like Lex Friedman. I can't stand him, but he did an episode today with a guy who has a podcast called "Growing Up Scientologist." When he was in the Scientology his whole life, and he was even like one of the guys who was an auditor. They trained the auditors to go investigate people's personal lives and figure if they were breaking into Scientology rules. So he knows like all of it, and he was explaining all of it. I'm like, this is such a it's just so stupid. It's Scientology is the dumbest. It's like South Park's episode on it was perfect. I've been rewatching
Yeah,
South Park.
I still remember that one.
I've been
Don't
rewatching
buy into
South
the
Park.
Dianetics thing.
Yeah, like I come to conclusion South Park is the best comedy ever written. It's my favorite. I'm watching it all again now, and it's just those guys are incredible.
Yeah.
I'll give Scientology some credit though for one just sort of being unabashedly like what it is. Like there's no pretense that this is like I wrote some sci-fi novels and it's a religion now. But also if you're gonna target anyone and fleece anyone, like you pick these sort of godless
Tom Cruise.
Yeah, like celebrities that don't really believe anything anyways, that have a lot of disposable income. Like you're not ruining their life any worse than Hollywood was going to anyways in a lot of ways. Like it's something like a cult where you're explicitly targeting poor people that are actually giving money that they can't afford to give, that you kind of a Scientology at least is hurting people that kind of deserve it and that can probably afford it.
I like that.
That's true.
Well, coming up 40 minutes. Let's move into the physics question. Eincast, do you want to go ahead and like lay out your physics thing that you think Grant and Xavier might disagree with?
I don't know if there's gonna be a disagreement. I'm trying to remember what this was because this was you sort of sprung this on us, but I think it was like 6 months ago we were talking about this.
We also tried to set this podcast up for like 6 months, so
that's fair.
What it was is I still am unconvinced that physics per se you can derive necessary truths from physics.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not convinced. I don't want to beat anybody up about it. Like I don't see how that's as far as what I understand physics
a compelling argument for why that would be.
I don't see why. I see a conflation of physics and metaphysics that I think.
You guys and so you either need to watch Bulge and I doing our review of Jacques Maritain's Degrees of Knowledge, or you just need to read him yourself. You guys would love Maritain. I think we mentioned that before, but you guys
I don't read.
Yeah.
You guys,
you need to listen to an audiobook of Degrees of Knowledge or something. Actually, no, that'd be a terrible audiobook.
There was 0 audiobooks of Maritain. I have checked. There was 0 audiobooks, and that is a pain to me because I can't read them either. They don't exist.
No, it's too dense.
Yeah, well, it's part of it's too dense. And Bulge and I talked about this. He was like an early 20th century French Thomist. And he writes like a 20th century Frenchman. Like then it's these long sentences with 17 dependent clauses and 4 parentheticals, and it's even well translated. It's a lot to read. Like it's good work, but it's dense and it strikes me as extremely French prose. I don't know the way to describe it.
The worst kind, yeah.
But so the couple of distinctions I want to try and make if we're gonna do this, and if everyone's just sick of this and wants to do it immediately, what's that?
I don't even know what we're doing.
Try to convince you, I guess.
I'm trying to make the argument because first is when you say necessary truth, like just things that we can know with certainty are true is what you mean, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Not just possibly true.
Right, but also not like
true.
Like they could be other than they are, but we know that they are true. It is necessarily true that we are having a conversation right now. Like we don't have to be having a conversation right now, but I know it to be true. It's not. It's not necessary that you and I are talking.
Conversation, yes.
You know we're having a conversation. That's not a belief of yours.
That it's a justified true belief because that's what
it's knowledge. It's something you know.
Yeah.
We're definitely not jumping into that distinction.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think the tendency is very often for people when they hear physics is they think it is entirely empirical, and that's the way it's presented as it is essentially pattern finding. Is you have you make observations, you notice trends, and you fit curves to it. And the essential work of physics, like for any science, is to try and reveal essences. Is to try and understand the nature of things. Mm-hmm. So to the extent that physics succeeds at that, it does tell you something about the nature of things, and there are essential truths that you need to know. Like we the first things we know are physical truths, right? We can't get any metaphysics that we have with any certainty before we have some physical truth, even if it's something trivial like knowing that existence exists. Like that's something you know from physics, not from metaphysics primarily, and it's from that physical understanding that you can then deduce metaphysical things. So I try to make a
Yes,
distinction between the empirical physics and physics properly, which is a kind of philosophy.
So
let me know
here,
if this. Go ahead.
no, you got it.
I want to say, let me know if this helps at all. Thing was in Aristotle's Metaphysics, where he says all men desire to know, and that the knowledge begins with the senses. I believe it basically boils down to like
Yes.
everything begins with the senses. And so, was that what you mean by? Does that uncount? Does that mean how do I put this? So my brain is not wanting to work tonight.
So I think I follow what you're saying, and so
the
first truths we know are sense, like the first knowledge we have is sense knowledge.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
We can't know anything about essences or ideas before we know senses first, and senses are inherently physical. So we have to know physical truth.
You're required. Metaphysics are required after that point to derive necessary truth.
So, but what are you deriving it based on? Like the premises that you're using to divide that metaphysical truth is physical truth. You're saying the universe exists,
studying the form of a thing is metaphysical. The physics concerns its material reality.
I don't think that's correct, because the materiality of something is its potentiality, right? Like if you focus just on the material, there's nothing to look at. There's nothing that actually is there. So physics absolutely has to do with the form of physical things, but you're discovering essences in physics in a way.
But once you start to consider forms, that's metaphysics.
When you start to consider form per se, it's metaphysics. So considering the form of a physical thing is still very much physics.
Kind of.
Okay.
I think the contemporary study of physics has become that.
I agree.
I don't think that's deniable. I mean, yes, the contemporary physics is attempting to talk about the essence of things rather than just talking about the thing itself. And so, yeah, I do think the way contemporary physics has become is a study that bleeds into what metaphysics used to cover. And to go back to the knowledge and belief distinction, there is still, even within Aristotelian thought as well as Thomistic thought, is that because they still kind of follow some of the Platonic divided line theory of knowledge, is that it still would be knowledge, like material world would still be knowledge, but the type of knowledge that it is a belief, because it is a trust in your sensation, that you're trusting the mediation of your sensation rather than the thing itself, because we can never know something in itself through experience. We can only know something, its essential properties, the moment that we begin to abstract qualities that are no longer sensible. And so once you get into that realm, that are no longer sensible, then that becomes something that's actually close to what it means to know something. Like to know something is to know its essence. And so it is true that knowledge begins through sensation, but that which you get from sensation, if you want to put in the contemporary scientific terms, that which you get through sensational processes are not in itself knowledge. Knowledge comes once you get through the perceptual process, when you begin to abstract qualities that are not sensible anymore.
And am I wrong to make the distinction that classically that was known as metaphysics?
Right, that's what I mean. So classically that would be known as metaphysics, but I do think with the rejection of metaphysics, there had to have been something to take place for understanding the essence of things. And I think that what took its place was the study of physics, which then began to use mathematics as a language that was more objective, trying to get at the abstract notions of being. But you can't get to know you don't understand that there is existence itself through existing things. You begin through experiencing existing things, and then through the investigation of that. Yeah,
you have to reflect. I would use this distinction of sensorial knowledge versus intellectual knowledge, and I think it's the same kind of distinction you're making.
It is, yeah.
But I mean that knowledge is as you know it as well as you do the intellectual knowledge. In some ways, you know it better because you know it more primarily.
You don't have justification for that it's true necessarily in the same way that you do.
Yeah, that's where I would say there's a little bit of complication, because that is what someone like David Hume proposed, and that I think we've picked up in the contemporary world. But classically, that has never really been the case. That which you experience, you know less than that which you don't experience, and that's why these disciplines are always changing. Like a biology textbook from 50 years ago will be outdated in most of its information, even though those are all things that we experience. And then you could take a math book of 2,000 years ago, and the truths that were derived from that will still be valid now. And that's precisely because that which we experience, we know less, because it's always in a flux of change. And so when you try to derive necessary conclusions from flux, I think what ends up happening is kind of the difficulties we have in contemporary physics, because they're not acknowledging the other discipline, which is the discipline of being qua being, that can actually begin to justify any of the observations,
which is metaphysics,
which would be metaphysics. Yeah,
I would argue it's actually that physics isn't justifying it. It doesn't understand itself really. It's lost the connection because it doesn't believe in metaphysics. Contemporary physics does not believe in metaphysics.
I think both are true.
Yeah, but I don't think there's modern physics say there's no essence to try and seek, so it becomes entirely phenomenological.
Yes,
but there is the history of physics of being natural philosophy. It is a quest to uncover these essential things about them. So you can only know the essence of the thing as well as you can interact with it physically, as well as it can be revealed through sensation, right? And I think if you
at least from the beginning, the starting point is always going to be sensation.
Yeah, so it's always going to be physics. It's always going to be physics in that sense.
Yeah,
physics is a foundational science in that sense. So if those truths are less certain, the truths that you derive from that are going to have that same uncertainty sort of attached to them, right? So there are foundational truths in physics that are necessarily true, like things exist, change exists, and those are the ones that we can use to derive metaphysical truths. But you have to have the certainty of those original things that are physical to even make those metaphysical claims.
You have to believe them.
Right. Yeah.
You can't prove because you believe something doesn't mean it's true.
It's not you don't believe that that things exist. That is something that you are in direct contact with. It is impossible for you to think otherwise coherently. You don't believe. It's not just belief that things exist.
Okay, so that's one. So what's another one you can put on top of that?
Things change. Change is real. When you start getting into Aristotle's,
but there's still a debate about what change is at all.
I mean, I don't think there is in the classical sense. Like it's the progression from potency to act, right? Like I think, and that's you get to these conclusions of modern physics because they don't have those. They don't understand first physics. They don't understand Aristotelian physics in the sense that they don't know what change. Like Aristotle knew what changes better than a modern physicist does because he.
Yeah. So what I would say, and Jeremy would probably agree with me, or maybe in the classical sense, once you start to observe change qua change, that's metaphysics. If you start thinking about change, that's metaphysics.
Sure,
things change is metaphysics. I mean, you can
things change is physics. A physical thing is something that is act and potency. Right, metaphysical things don't have change
but
in the same
claim
way that physical things do.
Change is a metaphysical claim, not a physical. It's a
It's a claim about physical things. How would it not be a physical claim?
It's a metaphysical claim about things that exist that are
things that exist physically.
Right.
Yes, so that's make it a physical claim.
I think once you get into a more general claim of change itself, that's when it becomes different. So, for example, you could say that fire or a flame changes through time, and then you could talk about how it changes, right? Or if you go to essential change, you could say that you could break down water to H2O, and you could say, the relation of the actual state and its potency is as such, and then you can have a description of that. And so those would be physical descriptions, right? And I think that is the realm of physics in the classical sense. But then when you say, I'm just going to talk about change as change, when you're no longer associated with a particular physical thing, that becomes a metaphysical conversation then. Because
and this is what I was saying about what Graham mentioned about form. If you're talking about form as form, that metaphysical. The form of a physical thing is still very much a physical.
Right. Yeah. And then
you can make probable assertions about how the thing acts through physics.
Well, you can make probable assertions. You can also make certain assertions. I mean, we understand inertia
that it exists.
That it exists. That if
inertia is probable.
No. We understand it as a property of a thing. It is part of the essence of massive bodies that if you give them some impetus,
and how did we derive that conclusion? Through observation of it, or was it through
observation, and through reflection on what that means? What it means to, I mean, it's literally what it means to be massive. To be a massive body is to be able to respond to the action of impetus.
Massive means to have mass.
Yes.
Okay. But on a fundamental level, any claim you make through observation is only probable.
No,
You can't. It's through extreme levels of repetition that you've observed the thing to be true, but it could also not do that.
Right, because I think that's necessarily true, just logically speaking, because you're gaining that through inductive reasoning. You're
the
not
inductive
gaining
part,
that
yes,
through
but there's this
deduction,
confusion that all the conclusions of physics are entirely inductive and not deductive. Like you again, because you can know something through physics about the nature of the thing. You can discern something about its essence.
You can only know
make
things
deductive points about
inductively through physics.
What's that?
You can only know things inductively through physics.
That's where I'm disagreeing. Is you can deduce things about its nature, about its essence. Again, you can understand what mass is.
But I don't understand how that would be possible. As far as how I am defining physics, I would say physics is the study of being as subject to change.
Right. So I agree. I'm not sure how that's.
But I don't know how you can deduce something through observation of change purely. Because once it's not about the observation of change, it's about being itself. That's metaphysics.
Not being itself. It's the thing itself, which can be a changeable being. It can be a physical being that you're observing.
Yes, but once you derive qualities of it and consider them the qualities of the thing, that's metaphysics.
Would you say color is a metaphysical property?
Discussing red as a thing,
as it inheres
as a universal
substance?
Thing.
Well, but
redness is metaphysical. Once you discuss redness, that's
redness. Yeah, but as it's instantiated in a substance, it's very much physical.
Mm-hmm.
But for me to recognize the universality of the color red in multiple things at once, that's a metaphysical observation.
Yes, but it's one that you deduce from physics. It's when you deduce from the physical.
No, I deduce.
You see that things are red. You observe red things in different substances, and from that you abstract the concept of red. But you have and as you use physics to deepen your understanding of what it means for something to be red, you understand the electromagnetic spectrum, you understand quantum mechanics and absorption of photons and all that sort of thing. That deepens your understanding of what red is. So it's the understanding of physics that allows you to have that deeper understanding of the metaphysical thing that is redness.
The audience may find this very boring, but I'm loving this conversation.
Jeremy checked out half an hour ago.
No. Jeremy's listening. Jeremy's got his listening face on.
Yeah.
I'm finding this very interesting. This is my excuse not to read Ed Faze's book.
I really do think part of the discussion that's getting a little difficult is that I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Grant is saying is that
wrong.
What physicists are doing right now are they're melding together the study of physics and metaphysics. Mm-hmm. And so what he is saying is that the moment that a physicist begins to speak about the essence of something or the essence of property in itself, then he is no longer doing physics; he's doing metaphysics under the guise of physics. Yes. And I think what you're saying, and Arco, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that what you're saying is that since in the discipline of physics as we know it, that is still a proper thing that one can do under the umbrella of physics.
Yes, and I'd be the first one to sort of rail against what physics has become in terms of. Because it doesn't understand itself and it doesn't understand metaphysics as it tries to. I've had a good friend that describes a lot of modern science as poetry, is because all it can do is really phenomenology, and then it sort of makes up these pretty stories about what things actually are, because it doesn't know first principles of physics and it doesn't know any metaphysics. Like Grant was mentioning, that physicists don't understand what change is, and so they sort of make up. Yeah. You hear these insane claims from relativity or quantum mechanics, or like Kale was mentioning, people have decided that relativity theory somehow disproves Aquinas' 5 ways somehow.
Right, yeah.
And it's because they don't understand the physics. They don't understand what the physics actually even saying, and then they don't understand the metaphysics that they're trying to disprove.
Well, because even the way that you word it begins to sound metaphysical, because you said the first principles of physics.
Yes.
And the problem is that that's exactly what Aristotle calls metaphysics. Well, Aristotle himself actually never used the word metaphysics. It was it was people after him that did.
Sure.
But when he talked about the study of the first principle, that is what later has been known as metaphysics. And so, yes, the first principles of physics classically was understood as metaphysics,
So
while the particular claims within physics would be the study of physics, or the natural philosophy, as I think has been called for a while.
So, and maybe there's some. What could you sort of enumerate what you would call the first principle? Those first principles, because we might just disagree about what we're calling.
Right. First principles is like the end of knowledge. Where the I guess where the rubber hits the road is when you talk about what he was saying, the color red, right? Me observing how light hits a certain object and what that object does, and what I understand the photons and everything for how color is interacting in the world, that would be the study of physics. But then if I'm going to speak of the color redness itself, and then that is the first principle, and so you begin to speak metaphysically.
I see.
And so, I do think what physics has become again is that it is attempting to almost marry those two ideas together, saying that we could come to first principles of physics, and the first principles of physics is still the study of physics. And I think that's where it gets a little complicated, because technically, in the classical sense, that wasn't the case. That was first principle, the study of first principles, or being, qual being, or metaphysics, or whatever you want to call it. Later on called theology, but anyways.
Right. Yeah, and that's. I probably should use a different. When I say first principle of physics, I mean first principle sort of epistemologically. The first things we know about physics, as we derive physics, what are the fundamental things that we know in physics that allow us that we build on to have a more complete physics. Not the first principle of the thing in itself, but the first principle as we understand it. And those.
So what would that be though beyond sensation?
Yeah, things exist, things change. The principle of identity, the principle of non-contradiction.
Right.
As embodied in the physical.
Right. No, but those are all metaphysical principles. I mean, you don't see it.
But they're known physical. Yes, you do. I mean, you see that things exist. You see
objects.
You see objects, but it's from that
existence. There's nothing that's existence.
You see instantiated existence. You're right, but it's a physical realization. As there is, you sense things. There is some, and that you deduce there is something to sense.
Yeah. So sensing things would be one, but once you talk about existence, that's a metaphysical claim then, because you're saying now I'm going beyond my sensation.
If I said that physical things exist, would that be better? No. If I say things exist,
I would say classically that still would be understood as metaphysics. Because
to observe the existence of physical things would be a metaphysical claim.
Yeah, because even Heraclitus, when he's talking about flux and change, I mean, he was already, at least in his study, was already viewing it as a metaphysical study, that you're going beyond sensation. Anything beyond sensation.
He was clearly confused, though, right?
Like, I would say his metaphysics was wrong, but I wouldn't say that because once you go beyond the sensation, you're making claims that are unsensible, right? And so the term existence refers to a principle. It doesn't refer to sensation at all.
And that's why I tried to correct it to the existence of physical things, not existence of a physical
existence
thing.
Of anything is a metaphysical claim.
Because now you're abstracting, because like for example, when you have kids, you kind of could tell this early on, is that when you're a child, you don't really have any of these ideas that things exist. They interact with objects and then they begin to name it. That's normally the first thing, right? So even when they're gooing and gawing, many times they're naming things because they're experiencing objects. They're not thinking in their head, I'm experiencing existing things. They're interacting with something, and so now this is Baba or this is Dada, and then obviously the mama, and so on and so forth. Because and anything outside of the direct sensational process is something that we actually developed, through time, and also I think developed through pure abstraction. And so this is kind of true with anything like motion. Right, motion. You don't experience motion. That's not a sensible thing. You experience objects, and you experience that object in different states of its reality. But motion is not a sensible thing. It's not like there's a table, there's a wall, there's a chair, and there is motion. It's like, no, the object begins to go into motion.
Mhm.
And now this idea now that we're putting that we call motion is something that I've abstracted from my sensation. And
yes, but it's something it's a physical thing that you've abstracted because it's a
No,
reduction of potency
motion-
to act.
motion itself is not
the motion
physical.
the motion of the thing is it's a part of the physical. The physical thing changes.
Yes, and so the physical thing is a thing, and whatever that object is. So if we say like the table that moves, yeah, all those things are observable insofar that there are things, but the motion itself is not.
It's not observable, but it is what it means to be physical is to be able to undergo motion, right? There has to be matter for it to be a physical thing.
Yes,
right?
change
is inherently linked with the physical.
Yeah, and I'm not denying that change is not linked, nor that motion is, and so on and so forth. But what I'm saying is that when you begin to go into that realm, you are abstracting, and you are no longer speaking of sensible things.
But you're speaking of physical things still. Like you can abstract to still.
They're
not
non-physical qualities of physical things.
Yeah, and so like if I just talk about motion, I'm no longer speaking of physical things. I'm just talking about motion in general. We could remove the physical objects from those things. It's the same thing that we do in mathematics, because numbers, for example,
the same thing you do in physics. I mean, physics is all about these abstractions.
No,
but it's an abstraction to point you to the essence of the thing. You understand something about the thing by understanding what it means for it to undergo.
But
locomotion.
once you start talking about the essences of the thing, that's metaphysics. It's not
classically, at least, understood. Yeah, classically, that's metaphysics at that point, because you're no longer talking about things anymore. Now you're talking about essences, and you're talking about abstractions. You're talking about first principles.
The issue here is this would lead you to say something like Newton's laws of motions are metaphysical laws, which
they are.
They don't say anything about being itself. They say things about being as changeable. They are fundamentally linked to being as changeable. They're physical principles because they apply to physical things. They're metaphysical principles. They don't say anything about being qua being.
I would say Isaac Newton probably just from reading his work. I mean, I think he wouldn't have an issue at all saying that he's saying something metaphysical, because most of his writings were there to prove God's existence. That's what his main point was. He was a philosopher. We later on categorize him as purely physics, but his writings were actually his entire theory and structure was an argument for the existence of God. And it was trying to reject more of the Thomistic understanding of God and impose more of this Protestant view of God as being an actual entity that gives laws to matter and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, I don't think he would have an issue saying that his claims were metaphysical.
You've removed from the content from physics at this point.
Say it again?
There's nothing left for physics to do, right?
No, I think there's plenty of things to physics. Yeah, like the observations they do of how light reacts to different objects.
As soon as you try and codify it, you're claiming it's metaphysics now. If I try and give a law of refraction, this is now a metaphysical law. If I try and
I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think a good physicist should also be a good metaphysicist.
I agree, but I think you are giving to metaphysics things that are proper to physics. Just because it is an abstraction or because it is not just empirical doesn't make it inherently metaphysical. Right?
It makes it a study of first principles, at least. And if I'm just defining metaphysics as the study of first principles, which is what it was normally understood in, I would say, yeah, then it does. That maybe you're right, and I would probably agree that you're right, that you can't really separate these things. You can't really separate the essence and the first principles of within the study of things. Yes, I would say that's correct. But that's why even Aristotle and most thinkers were both physicists and metaphysicists simultaneously. And I think what has gotten lost in contemporary physics isn't so much the immense study that they do. I think they have done an immense amount of research that people 1,000 years ago would have never thought of. And so I think there was great strides and there's great things that came about it. But what happens is that they're also simultaneously not disciplined at truly comprehending first principles of things at all.
I agree 100%.
And I think that's where the complication lies, is because I think a physicist should be a good metaphysicist, because you can't really separate the two. And for most of history, there was no separation. The separation really started to begin heavy around the 1800s. But prior to that, I mean, you read Newton's work. I mean, he was all about speaking of God, speaking of theology, speaking of the physical objects of the world. Obviously Aquinas. Most of the writers throughout the entire Western history never truly separated the two. The separation comes later.
Kind of a side question, but didn't Newton have like a back and forth with there was some contemporary physics like philosopher guy who a lot of Catholics talk about. Who was it? Boethius? Who am I thinking of?
Oh, I'm not sure. I know he had
Someone.
who was it? Yeah, I have to look that up. But yeah,
Leibniz. It was
Leibniz.
That's
Okay.
who he was. He's back and forth with Leibniz about things. And there was Ed Fazer talked a lot about Leibniz, and I think it's 5 Proofs.
Yeah,
that's why I was like, my brain was just connecting to Leibniz real quick. This has been very interesting. I don't think we're going to reach an end to it tonight. No, it's fine. It's fine. Before we go, because I know Grant already wants to die over here, I figured we bring up the ontological argument.
You know what? I need to assess because Jeremy always thinks I'm way more of an asshole about everything than I think I'm being, and I also think that people think I'm more angry than I ever actually am.
You have a very when you're listening to something, a very blank face. This very just don't want to be here face, and that's what it is. At least to me. Now I was to say before we leave, the ontological argument. Because I know Grant doesn't like it, but I love it. I think it's
me
great.
too. I'm the same with you, Caleb.
How do they?
I think
remember how I used to say it.
Well, that's I think the ontological of if I think God will, then God will. But I think there's a different way of thinking about it.
It's God must be, because if he wasn't, then he wouldn't be.
Yeah,
this is like Anselm's argument, right? It is.
Yeah.
Well, I recently there was there's 2 atheists, Zeus Mid and Cosmic Skeptic. One's agnostic, one's atheist, and they're both really actually Contra Skeptic has Mr. Bear on his podcast and has great conversations with him about things. He's a very smart. He actually does atheist videos debunking other atheists for how bad their arguments are. He has an hour video just debunking Christopher Hitchens. He was a huge Christopher Hitchens fan, so it's a really interesting video. But they talked about the ontological argument, and I think the way some people formulate it is true but very hard to follow. But I think there's a way to explain it where it makes more sense. And so the way it was explained in the podcast, I kind of found when they talked about necessary words, as if they were
being, yeah.
If you could just lay out the ontological argument real quick, and I'll add to it, then I can see if we can get Grant to accept this different version of it.
Lay it out.
Yeah.
Who was asked to lay it out?
Jeremy was.
If you just lay it out real quick, and then I can add to it.
I love the way Caleb sets these up. It's like, I want to talk about this argument, but Jeremy, make it for me real quick.
Yeah, real quick. I don't want to mess it up. I can add to it. I don't know the formulation of it.
The ontological argument.
The ontological argument.
Essentially saying that if there's something that no greater that I could think of, and obviously that which is the greatest I could think of necessitates existence, because if it didn't necessitate existence, it's not the greatest thing that I could think of.
Yeah. So that's the Ansonian version of the ontological. But there's another one that was put forward, I think, back in the 17 or 1800s, and it basically goes that, and it replaces goodness with a necessary fact, where it's basically just like if you can imagine a being that has to exist to cause existence, and it kind of goes into like I think the word they use is like a modal. It's called the modal argument for ontological, the modal ontological argument, and it kind of gets into if you can imagine these different words, but you can't imagine a word with a necessary function to maintain that word, then it can't exist. So you have to imagine a word that has a necessary function that maintains that word, which I think is just the, first God maintaining all of everything. And so I think that's just I had a note on this and I had it formulated yesterday, but then I just had all the energy sucked out of me today, and now I can't think. But there's that was basically it. And that was
all these arguments that start from some kind of epistemology. It's like, well, if I can think about that, they always they drive me crazy because they feel so Cartesian. And like sort of related to what we were talking about. You have the real world as a reference. Like you can say, okay, I know there are some things that I can then think about, that I can reflect on and think thoughts about. When you start entirely in your head, you just end up with these. Feels very navel gazing in some way. I don't know. They're so contentless. Like there's something kind of interesting about them, but
Right,
it's more like a Rubik's cube than any kind of like actual deductive process. They drive me a little crazy because you can.
The way I thought it described is it's like armchair arguments for God, where you sit in the armchair and think and come to a conclusion, not actually do what you think. I'm a fan of those kind of arguments.
I think the easiest way to put like Anselm's argument, or just the ontological argument altogether, is that
I'm checking your word count because I think I have the shortest.
Oh, do you? Okay. Well, you probably do. So to be being absolutely requires it to be, or it is not being absolutely. Like it's a necessary quality of what it means to be absolutely. So yeah.
Can you be that, Granty?
Yeah, but I could say that about literally anything.
Give me an example that you could say that about anything.
It has to be an apple, because if it wasn't an apple, then it wouldn't be an apple. Like, okay.
But is there anything in an apple
that is true? But I find like, what?
Well, it's a tautology, and so that's basically what the not the cosmological argument, the ontological argument is stating. It's saying that it's necessary, it's embedded in the definition of what it is. And so it is foolish to ever think otherwise. You know, like if you're talking to somebody,
I find that to me, that just doesn't sound convincing at all to anybody. I don't know that to me, when you talk about navel gazing, that sounds like the most masturbatory thing anybody's ever developed. Like it's a thing to impress other thinkers.
Exactly.
Like it's a thing like, oh my God, Anselm found the nerdiest nerd thing that anybody's ever said.
You'll hear these stories about these like mathematicians doing proofs, and like that it's all like how few lines can you get it down to deduce, like when Russell and Whitehead are doing Principia. Exactly. It's like they go through like 20,000 lines to drive 2 + 2 = 4 without like referencing like 2 apples and 2 more apples. It's like, well, here's some apples, done. Like it just seems so. Like,
it doesn't matter that that's true at all.
Exactly.
Right. Well, because it's the same reasoning that one can give to someone like Thaddeus. You know, someone like Thaddeus who believes in like epistemic relativity or moral relativity or whatever. It's basically you're saying that once you make that assertion, you're already making something univocal. And so every assertion that you make about a truth will always be a univocal claim about truth. And so it's embedded.
One fundamental univocal truth. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so it's saying the same thing about this, is that when you're talking about being itself, to say that being itself is not really makes no sense. Being itself must be. And so being itself must be, and then you cannot deny that there is being.
Yeah, okay. And
yeah, so then that's saying that anything that denies being itself would be one of the most foolish statements you could ever make. It's even more foolish than saying that truth is relative. Because what you're saying in that point is saying that, yes, I am aware that I am. However, that I am is not that I am. It's like,
and maybe I'm already convinced by like 40 other better arguments than that. So, or like more compelling arguments. So when I hear that, I'm like, that's the most boring thing I've ever heard.
And I think implicitly they rely on those other arguments, right? Like the other arguments didn't actually detail with some heft how to get from sensible things to the divine, and this just it's all sort of implicit in there, and if you untangle it enough, like I think it probably reduces to a more coherent argument, but it relies on those more coherent arguments to be made in the first place. Like if you didn't have those better arguments, you couldn't make the ontological one.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a like an underwhelming poop kind of feeling to it.
It's
like it doesn't.
I still remember the first time you read it. It made me laugh so bad. You're like, what?
We were on it for like an hour, weren't we?
You're like, why is that even?
I'm like, that's so dumb.
It's like the theological version of argumentation ethics. You guys ever dive into that when you're in your
wailing against libertarians?
What was it? What was the thing?
Argumentation ethics. It's like it's Hoppa's thing.
Oh yeah,
for
you have to be submitting consensually to a
yeah, but by having a
to have one at
conversation,
all.
it's the same thing just for theology. I think is the ontology. Like they feel very similar in terms of it's more like a word game than
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, but I never got what
Shocking.
Hopper's saying. Is Hopper derived that from his Marxist professor Habermas, and Hopper is the same. Habermas had the same. Habermas had the same exact argument, but it applied to instead of like non-coercive and like non-violence, it was, well, if we're gonna have a conversation, you must agree I have to be in the right frame of mind to have a conversation. Therefore, you agree that I have the right to food and property. And that was.
No, they're all sort of fundamentally
I'm like, no, you have a right to none of that.
Yeah, then you wouldn't be engaging in a conversation, and that would be
You have a right to converse.
Yeah, it's very stupid.
You don't have a right to exist.
It only exists if you believe in rights.
Yeah.
But, that is a. This has been a very slow-paced episode with a kind of been
Has
nice.
it?
I think
Maybe for you.
Caleb tuned out like half an hour in and was like,
You're
it's been an hour and a half.
You're elated. You're elated that no one screamed at each other.
I am kind of elated.
I knew this was going to happen. Like, I think there was sort of this tension because of all like the suit of arguments that we've had. But like, I knew Jeremy and I were going to talk. Like, yeah, this will be fine. Like, we'll get along. We'll mostly agree, and it'll be. Grant will look like he's asleep, and Caleb will actually fall asleep, and then we'll move on.
I about did.
Maybe next time we should just have like a whole episode just on logic. Principles of logic.
I actually,
am I gonna get to own you? Didn't like it on Twitter that time?
It's going so well.
This when I started trolling Jeremy on Twitter about his about not understanding how logic works.
Yeah.
That was
We're both really easy to troll because I just take everything at face value. So I'm not irony poisoned.
I still every time I look at Ein's profile pic of Ayn Rand with a cross, I still kind of like chuckle a little bit.
I can't stand Ayn Rand's face staring at me.
This is why I changed to Flannery O'Connor for my Twitter profile, but I don't know the objectivist eyes.
If I already find women generally unpalatable, like the weirdest looking woman to ever live.
There's really something masculine about her, though, right? Like she's got this Russian masculinity. I feel like she's sort of there's nothing pretty.
Yeah, but in like a Mel Gibson Satan figure from Passion of the Cross kind of way.
Oh man, it's almost Easter. I gotta watch that again. I watch it with the kids every Easter. It's pretty good.
I still haven't watched it. I got like
what? You haven't? Wow.
No,
you wear a crucifix and haven't seen Passion of the Christ.
I don't like I don't like blood or gore, and so this like the whipping part. I kind of like I can't get through it.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, but I'm gonna try this year. I'm gonna actually try to sit down and watch it.
It's your effeminate Protestant upbringing, Caleb. Bring us back around to the.
Dude, there's so many things I noticed. It's like, and I just started noticing randomly, like, oh, that's because that's Protestant thing, isn't it? Yeah. I still can't get over it. Like every time I see a saint skeleton, every time I see a saint skull, I'm just like, yep, I was raised Protestant. It's just so weird to me. I don't get it.
Like under the altar, we have Saint Andrew's middle second knuckle.
It's just like, why? I don't.
We have Saint Therese of Lisieux's left upper canine tooth under the altar.
Speaking of this, I don't know what this is a weird connection, but I saw I've been seeing a lot of Greek Orthodox TikToks, and apparently it's a common thing for the Greek Orthodox to believe Catholics, the asses on Ash Wednesday, are like actual human asses. That like one of the parishioners volunteered their body to be the asses that spread on people's foreheads.
We've been learning St. James' body since the year 20.
We have to keep producing martyrs. We'll run out of ashes for Ash Wednesday.
That's why the priest shortage is such a big deal. That's why we keep our bodies uncremated, because they actually have to be burned for Ash Wednesday once a year.
You know that I don't mean to like get too serious with it, but you remember that last episode, the episode Grant we did with that what's his name? The
Mr.
King
Patriarch.
Yeah, Mr. Patriarch, that's who it was.
The king.
The King Patriarch, whatever. Is that the more I started to think about it, the more that I really think that both Orthodox and as well as Protestants objection in the end fundamentally is about the papacy.
Well,
And I think everything else kind of derives from that. It's like every other objection is derived from them not wanting to be subject to an authority through a magisterium, through something that doesn't allow them to begin to interpret things the way that they want to. I don't know. It's just something that kind of just hit me really, really true there, just because there's a conversation. I was like, well, in the end, there's nothing that you're really objecting to besides that. And I think it was true with, when we talk to Bill and we talk to your mom, I think in the end, it's like the hardest thing for them to ever accept is that they have zero control. They themselves have like zero say on anything because you're subject to the authority. And
no one wants to submit to anything. It's
right,
like, I mean, it's even Einstein's point about like how atheists, like Protestants, they just don't want to submit to like reality.
Yeah,
they don't.
I think Orthodox are much more clear that it's about the papacy. I really think Protestants, it's the same idea. It's a rejection of authority, but it's not the authority of the papacy. It's the authority of reality. Like, they don't want to be subject to the laws of nature. And the papacy and the magisterium is very quick, and it's quick to remind you that you are subject to those.
Right.
Like, you might, and it's why I think Protestantism is fundamentally a Gnostic faith, and it's a Gnostic heresy in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, I agree with you there. Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, I think that's the root of it. I think that's the root of it. That they don't really think the real is real. Right?
Yeah,
and anything that sort of forces them on that, they reject. And because Catholicism is so rooted in the real, and we talk about the scarred and bloody body of Christ, or Christ on the cross, like these are very physical, real, in your face things, and the Protestants want to be as separate from that as possible. They really want to be in the sort of Platonic. They're Gnostics. They want to be separated from physical reality. Physical reality is sort of beneath the divine.
And I kind of noticed that even with like the I was reminding Grant about that one dude that was what's his name? I can't remember his name, but he was a sedevacantist, and it was the same thing that everything that he was stating. I don't remember he was on Twitter.
Oh, Caleb, do you remember like, was it like a year ago maybe?
Yeah, I was like, maybe a
year ago or more. There was the like schizo sedevacantist that replied like 90 times to Jeremy's tweet. He had the little yes.
That guy was fucking insane. I blocked him on the second tweet. I'm not getting this one. No, I'm not doing it.
But what I've noticed,
you didn't have to. He replied like 96 times.
Yes. even with those type of Protestants, because essentially the reform of Protestantism, it's really the same thing. It's a denial that, like you say, of reality, and the denial of history, denial of everything. But a lot of it it's as if the papacy represents, or at least reminds them of what they're trying to deny, and so to subject themselves to it, I think is just far too difficult.
Yeah,
and they have to come up with the most convoluted, like the most convoluted reasoning behind it. It's like, why? I mean, if it requires this much, I guess argumentation for this, there has to be something kind of wrong with your theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have to try too hard to defend your idea, it's probably wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. There's back in the Protestants, like rejection of, I'm going to say rejection like physical, basically, because it's like the rejection of icons, rejection of like good aesthetics, rejection of, even like like body and blood. Like this, it's not bread and wine. It's a cracker, and it's a grape juice. It's just a rejection of anything that is proper and physical. There's I know a few Protestants, and I think I was like this too when I was younger. There was like a weird sense of like inflated ego and superiority. It was like, oh, maybe lesser people need things like rosaries to pray, but I can just pray without it.
Right? Yeah. That's interesting.
Weird, it's a weird. Like I remember, there's an article I wrote for I had like a little blog when I was like 14, 15, when I was an absolute fucking idiot. I recently found it, like deleted all of them, but I had.
I was gonna say we should dig this up for an episode. I would love to hear your 40-year-old Caleb's.
I had a little blog when I was like 15. About,
I heard a dog when you were young.
Deleted him.
You want him to dig the dog up for an episode?
Yeah. Here's your dead dog. Where is your dog now?
Some bones with some hair on it.
I wrote like an article. I think I got like 5 views on it, and it was on how I'm just gonna say I'm just gonna basically say what it was. Because not gonna try to feign humility about it because it's really stupid. I basically wrote like, maybe lesser dumb people need like icons and need like beautiful churches, but why do you even need any of that? You can just pray to God directly. You don't need any of these things. It was just such a like utilitarian, minimalist, like rejection of all beauty and anything physical. Because like we don't need that. I'm smart enough not to need it. And that's like a very common theme I'm noticing with a lot of different Protestants. So just they either implicitly or explicitly. Like I know a guy whose arguments for Protestantism is like, well, it's decentralized, therefore it's more effective. And he treats it like it's like an engineering program, like he's an engineer, and he treats it like it's a machine. Like, well, do we move the papacy? It runs faster, therefore it's more effective. You have texting. Why pray to the saints when I can just text you actually to pray for me? That was literally his argument, and it's just like, this is so stupid.
Yeah, like and with the rejection of the sacraments, like it's getting away from anything that your body interacts with. Right, like why does the priest need to be there? Well, because you need to be physically in the presence of you can't call your priest. You can't. What was that?
Yeah, and like you said, they're Gnostics, so if the body's evil, why would you let it interact with anything holy?
Yeah,
exactly.
No.
Puritans. Every time I go out and about now, I find myself muttering in my breast like Puritans. Every time I talk to a woman nowadays in the South, like Puritan, they're everywhere. And it's
like fucking bitch.
It's this fucking bitch. I hate women.
Caleb has a proper understanding of the masculine. The church has done him well.
Like I was out and about, and I was with my friends. We were talking normally, and a girl came in to kind of stop cursing. And the girl noticed it and was like mad that I stopped cursing around her.
Oh, really?
I'm like, okay, fine, you're a cunt. What do you want from me? You're a cunt. Fuck off. It's just like it's so stupid.
Yeah.
Well, and we got for an hour and a half. Anyone got any final topics? We're gonna end with me calling a woman a cunt.
Can we get that on the soundboard?
Everybody just hangs up.
Mic drop.
I want to get our old quotes from the old thing. What the heck is that?
What is that one?
I would not. No, what was the one on the top left? Do the one on the top left, the guy's like, cop, stop the cap? What is that? What is that?
That's one of the new lingos from Gen Z. I just know from my teenage kids.
Stop the cap?
Yeah, stop the cap.
Is that like no cap?
Yeah, no cap, yeah.
Like stop
no
lying?
Cap instead bussin'. Yeah. No cap.
Because it used to be no cap.
Lying.
Now it's stop the cap.
That's what I said. Like stop lying. Stop capping.
I hate that. Jeremy starts crying. See, the thing about the pussy one is it replaces the air horn. I kind of would want, I kind of want the air horn instead.
Oh, I know.
Let's see what I got here. I got a few sounds. I got a sad trombone. I got a record scratch. Applause. Rim shot.
Having Jeremy in charge of the soundboard is such a terrible idea.
I just spam the air horn on the old one.
It's the remix.
You'd be a great DJ. Just
pussy. Anyway, it's just gonna keep happening until
this next like 30 minutes is.
So my 3-year-old's at the point where he'll sort of like just if he's sick or something, he'll just be like, all done. This is Jeremy with the pussy thing. It's just he's trying to emote as best as possible, and he's just completely done with this, just by spamming the pussy button. He's got in front of him.
Everybody hang up.
Let's wrap it up. Let's do some plugs. Ein, where can people find you at?
Nowhere right now. I'm technically on Twitter, where I will not be for the next 40 some odd days. At Einkath. I write allegedly on anarchocatholic.substack.com. I'm one of the contributors for Austro Thomism whenever I actually write anything. It has been a while. I'm sorry, Caleb. It'll happen at some point.
Colin has gotten like 3 articles out while waiting on you.
I thought you said you write illegibly.
That's true as well, but no, allegedly.
Wow.
That's just a handwrite everything and just like fax it to you or something.
Oh my gosh.
Numerous possible. Like, Caleb, can you? I got my article ready.
That would be interesting. Handwriting all of your articles and then scanning them and posting them as PDFs. That could be kind of cool.
That would be fun.
Or have Caleb transcribe what I write.
No, with the scratch
with the typos and everything.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, Caleb, do your best and just see what he comes up with.
I somehow today when texting Grant, I tried to say we're going to talk about this, and I ended up saying we're typing about this. I don't know how my phone started going to typing.
Sanity.
But yeah, so that's my plugs. Whenever I'm going to write something, like I've got something that's been half done for 3 months, and I have not had a chance to finish it. It'll be good.
Oh, nice.
I can't wait. I really loved the last one, the ACS and the Mystic. I think it was.
That was one of my favorite pieces. I love doing that one. That was in response to one of those idiots that was like, the theory of relativity disproves. And I basically explained to him that he doesn't understand relativity or anything.
Very good.
Or anything.
Granty,
That's remind me of Brian.
Granty,
When he was like, "Are you sure it was a book? Are you sure it wasn't nothing?"
Grant, Zammy, where can people find you at?
I am at Boob Rejector on Twitter.com. Jeremy, are you at Dr. Diogenes?
I'm probably still with that.
Very, very inactively, which is good. Our show's better
I
when
missed
you're
the
not
old
online
Jeremy
at all.
account. Sorry.
I know.
Yeah,
Me too.
what was it? Oh, Escala Morris, and you told people
Yeah.
to kill themselves.
Wait.
Yeah, we're Contra Gentiles. Find it anywhere on anything. Just Google it; it'll come up. Google Jeremy's full name, and it'll come up online.
Really?
Yeah.
So honestly, that might be better because whenever I search Contra Gentiles, I end up getting all these things about like the manuscript or the document instead. Like it's not the first. Your show's not the first thing that comes up because I see things about Contra Gentiles instead, and it's.
Yeah.
It's. I need to find a better keyword.
Jeremy's
Maybe
name.
Jeremy's name, I guess.
Yeah.
Just his picture. Do like a reverse image search.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all we got going right now.
Awesome. Okay, well, this has been another episode of Austro Thomism. Like, comment, share, subscribe. We're on Substack now. Make sure you read the articles. Connor Mortel is posting, like, he's sending me an article about once a week. I think it's Exodus 90s that's leading him to write more, which has been great.
Nice.
Yeah, that's about it. Nothing new coming out for a while, but will be a new episode of the new series, The Classic Driven Life, with Joshua Ham. Is that how you say his last name? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to do. We're going to start with Plato Symposium and move on to Shakespeare. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So,
Oh wow.
you guys subscribe for that. That's it. Everyone is let me find the exit here so I can hit the exit.